Hello guys, and welcome back to our 12D notes. So we just finished up this problem right here, so we're going to go through and do the next two. So our next one is solve the system of equations by elimination. So I know it's been a second since we've done elimination and substitution. That was all the way back in KC 5, right? We're now in 12. So let's go through. So remember, kind of elimination is when you're trying to get rid of either x or y, right? So the reason we call it elimination is you're trying to eliminate one of the variables. So we have our system. We've got y equals x squared plus 15x plus 40 and y equals 3x plus 4. So with elimination, in this case, right, we've got an x squared and an x. So that's going to make it very hard to eliminate y. But in both it's going to make it hard to eliminate x. But in both equations, you just have y. So it's actually much easier to eliminate y in this case because both equations already just have y and y. So we're going to try and eliminate y, kind of make them cancel each other out. The only thing is right now they're both positive. So two positive things aren't going to cancel each other out. We need a positive and the negative of the same thing in order to cancel each other out, right? So if we're looking at this, a positive y and a positive y don't cancel. But if we had a positive y and a negative y, those do cancel. So we have to figure out a way to make one of these y's negative. Well, if it's positive, all I have to do to make it negative is just multiply it by a -1, right? So the only thing is you can't just multiply one part of your equation by -y, you have to multiply the whole thing. So we're going to rewrite out what we have now with our new equation. So the first one always stays the same. So our first one is still just going to be y equals x squared plus 15x plus 40. But now we're multiplying this whole second equation by -1. So everything is going to become negative. So we'll have -y. And what I'm going to do is line up like our two x's, because right now they're not really lined up, but I'm going to line them up because it's going to make it a little easier. So previously we had a positive 3x, so now it's going to become a negative 3x, and your positive 4 is going to become a -4. So now we have a situation where, look, we have a positive y and a negative y. So those two just cancel each other out. So now we want to, write what our new equation is. So our y and our -y, those cancel each other out. So now all we have is 0. Our x squared, we just bring it down because there's nothing to combine it with. And then we just do, over here, we're doing 15x and then minus 3x. So that gives us 12x. And then we have 40 and minus 4. So that is a positive 36. So now we're at the point where we have x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 0. We know what to do with that. We're going to go through, right now now that we've gotten rid of y, all we have is x's, and we know how to solve this, right? We've done that a bunch of times, so we need to figure out what multiplies to get 36 that when you add, you get 12. Right, so this is, right, if you do 6 times 6, you get 36, and if you do 6 plus 6, you get 12, right? So when we multiplied, we got 36, and when we added, we got 12. So we're factoring it, right? So now we have 0 equals, and then we have x plus 6 and x plus 6 because the two factors we came up with were positive 6 and positive 6. Right, so then we can write this instead as x plus 6 squared, and then we're going to go through and solve. So we take the square root of both sides because we need to do the opposite operation of squared. So the opposite operation of squared is a square root. So that takes us, the square root of 0 is just 0, and then the square root of x plus 6 squared is just x plus 6, and then we need to go through and solve it. So we're just going to subtract 6 from both sides, and that gives us x equals negative 6. Right, because if we have both of these, we would just have the answers x plus 6 equals 0 and x plus 6 equals 0. So we do have two solutions, they're just the same number on this one. So, and the other thing is, to solve the system of equations, right, we actually need to, this is just the x-coordinate, right? When it says solve the system of equations, this means you need to find, oh my goodness, that handwriting is, we need to find your ordered pairs. Pair or pairs, depending on how many solutions it has. So if it were going to have two solutions, we would end up with two different x values, right? So we only got one x value. So there's only one solution. Okay, so if you only get one x value, that tells you there's only one solution, right? Because we had the same factor twice, right? That means you're only going to get one number for x out of it. If this was like x plus 6 and x plus 1, you'd have two different x values, so you'd have two solutions. This time, we only have one x value, so there's only going to be one solution. So the last thing we have to do is figure out, right, ordered pairs, you need an x and a y. So we have our x, all we need to do is figure out the y. Well, cool thing is, we know that y equals 3x plus 4. So what we're going to do is take and plug in our x value, right? If you see up here, y equals 3x plus 4. This one is way easier to figure out what y is because x doesn't have an exponent. So we're just taking that, right, and we're bringing it down here to figure out how to solve for y. So we have that, and all we're going to do is we have y equals 3, and then we're going to replace the x with negative 6, right? 3 times negative 6 is negative 18 plus 4. So that means y is negative 14. So the last thing you need to do is just write it as your ordered pair. So your ordered pairs are always x and then y. So we're writing negative 6 first and then negative 14. Right? The cool thing is, so you, for the test and all that, you do need to show your work on this one, but we do know that you can check your answer on the calculator, right? So if we go to the calculator and we have x squared plus 15x plus 40 is our first one, and then our second one is 3x plus 4. Alright, so you can kind of see, right, let's see if we can figure out. Okay, so here's where we see where the intersection would be. So we go to menu, analyze graph, intersection, here's our lower bound, here's our upper bound, negative 6, negative 14. That matches what we got. So you can use your calculator to check your answer, right? Because we know that this is where our two lines intersect, we just found it through doing a different method than graphing. We did elimination instead of graphing. But you can use the graph to check your answer, because on the test it will give you the method that you have to use. So our second one is substitution. So substitution, right, we are trying to eliminate a variable, but substitution is where you plug one equation into the other. So in this case, so we've got x squared minus 5x and plus 7, and then y equals 2x plus 1, right? So we want to look for what our two equations have in common. They both have y, which is very helpful, right? So if they both have y, okay, we can actually just take this 2x plus 1 and plug it in, substitute. We're taking one equation and plugging it into the other, right? Kind of like this, right? If we had y equals 4 and then y equals x, well, if both things equal y, then that would mean these two things are equal to each other. So we could just take this and plug it in, therefore x equals 4. So it's like if y equals 4 and that same thing, y equals x, that means these two things also then have to be equal to each other because they both equal y. So you just take the x and plug it in. So you're kind of doing substitution. So over here, if these two things both equal y, well then they must equal each other. So we're going to take 2x plus 1 and replace it in the first equation, and then equals negative 5x plus 7. Since they both equal y, they equal each other. So now we're going to go through and solve. So we're going to have to factor on this one too, but the thing is, in order to factor, we have to have it equal to 0. So we have to get rid of all this stuff on this side, right? So we need to subtract the 1 off of both sides to get rid of the 1. So now we've got 2x equals x squared minus 5x, and then 7 minus 1 is 6. And then we also need to go through and get rid of the 2x. Also, right, we need to cancel that out. We need to cancel this out, right? We're not canceling, we're kind of just moving it over to the other side. We're getting rid of it on the one side so that we can go through and factor it. So now that we've done that, now we have 0 on this side, which is what we need, and then we have x squared, negative 5x minus 2x is negative 7x, and then plus 6. So now we're at the point where we can factor. So we need to come up with two numbers that we multiply to get 6, and if we add them, we get negative 7. So with this one, we're going to have negative 6 and negative 1, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. But if you do negative 6 plus negative 1, you get negative 7. So our two numbers are going to be negative 6 and negative 1. So this tells us that 0 equals, and then we have x minus 6 because that's our first one, and then x minus 1. So with this one, we have two different things, so we're going to get two different solutions for x. So then we split up 0 equals x minus 6 and 0 equals x minus 1. We're going to add 6, add 6. So our first one is that x equals 6, and then we add 1 and add 1. And our second one is that x equals 1. So now we have our two x values. We have to go through and find the two y values that go with it. So we're going to use, right, our equation, this one, the y equals 2x plus 1, and we're going to plug our two x values in it. I am running out of time. So it is y equals 2x plus 1. So we're going to plug in the x equals 6 first, and then we're going to do the x equals 1. So y equals 2 plus 1. So we're going to take this one first, plug it in. We're plugging in 6. So y equals 12 plus 1, which is 13. So when you have an x equals 6, when we plugged it in, the y is 13. So I did the other one for you real quick. We got a y of 3, so now we just have to write our ordered pairs. So it's going to be 6, 13, and 1,